Welcome to the Dog Trainers Podcast,
a podcast created by dog trainers for dog trainers or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
Hey everybody, welcome back and thank you so much for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast. Mariano Alvarez here with Brent LaBrada and two extremely special guests we'll be announcing in a bit here. First, we do want to let you guys know that you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube by searching Dog Trainers Podcast. Without further ado, let's get into our special guests. Over to you, man.
Well, what is up, guys? Yes, it is season 2, episode 11, and we got 2 for the price of 1 here. This is a lane in dog training that we have never touched on, right? Between sport dog training, pet dog training, behavior specialists, all of that, we have the privilege of having 2 extremely talented, and also like their resume and the merits that they have under their belt. Their whole resume is huge. We have 2 dog trainers who train dogs for film, right? So what's the proper term, Joel? It's film dog trainers.
I would say Hollywood dog trainers.
Hollywood dog trainers. There you go. And so we have 2 of them. We have Joel Silverman, who you guys may know. He has several books that he's came out. What color is your dog? He has many courses on how to actually get into the dog training business for movies. And then his mentor, Bryan Renfro. How are you, gentlemen? How you guys doing?
Good.
Good. How are you?
Good. Hey, don't worry. You can call us anything. We've been called a lot of things on set. So.
Very cool. Well, I had the privilege of getting to meet Joel. I went out to a seminar that he put together with Jay Jack and Larry Krohn. And, the whole vibe is just a great experience. And so much so that we're actually able to go out and document the whole experience of going to seminars. And it was a really cool experience. It was one of the most fun I've ever had at a seminar personally. And getting to meet the people and the dog trainers. And so it's just such a great privilege to have met Joel. And through this, we get to dive into the mind of someone who specializes in training dogs for film and television. And then also Bryan, who actually helped teach them. So I guess let's just kind of let's jump into the story. Let's jump into how you guys know each other. And who you guys are, what do you guys do, and how do you guys know each other?
Well, Joel kind of came up to. Joel was a trainer, a killer whale trainer, and at a park, and came to Universal Studios where I was
killer
working.
Whales.
And he wanted to learn domestic animals. He had been training killer whales and dolphins.
Wow.
We started up at Universal Studios and started working with him. And sooner or later, it didn't take long at all before he was very good with dogs and cats and birds and all the things that we taught up at Universal Studios.
Wow.
And that's how we met. And I don't know, Joel, how long ago was that?
That was 1980.
1980. Wow. Okay.
1980.
Very cool.
That wasn't even a thought.
But prior to that, Bryan's story was great because how he got started up there real quickly, how you got started. So, I think that's a great story, Bryan.
Oh, you want to? I got started right after, pretty much after I returned home from Vietnam and got out of the Army. And actually, I was on a motorcycle, a Harley, and got a truck pulled out in front of me, and I hit him about 50 miles an hour, and I lost the job that I had. And because my leg was a bit messed up, and my uncle, who was running the show up at Universal Studios, gave me a job cleaning cages for $50 a week, and that's how I got into it. That was like 1972.
Wow. And I wanted to ask you a bit more about your Army service, and we'll kind of get into that a bit later. But for now, I guess you started cleaning kennels at the studio for Universal Studios?
Yes, at the animal show up in the tour center at Universal Studios. We had kennels in the back of the stage, and that was my job, to clean the kennels and turn on the tape recorder during the show, and I was terrified.
How old were you around this time?
I was, I don't know. I guess I was 23, something like that.
Okay. And how did that progress from cleaning kennels and turning on tape recorders into what? What came next?
Well, I learned I learned by watching trainers, many different trainers. I was very lucky to work with some of the like Frank and Ray Berwick, people like that who are the greatest trainers. And I learned from that, and I kind of dismissed the things that I didn't like and kept the things that I did like. And I just started learning how to train animals. And and training animals is not that hard. It's a lot of common sense. It's and I always said that your only limitation is your imagination. If you can imagine something, then you could probably train it if it's physically capable of the animal. So after a couple of years, I became the head trainer and the head performer, and I stayed there till 1985.
Oh wow! Okay, so that's a long stint there.
Yeah.
Okay.
72 to 85.
So you had met Joel during this time that you were training dogs for. Got it. Okay.
Now, was it just dogs or was it other animals?
Oh,
too?
Dogs, cats, birds, rats. Just and as a matter of fact, years and years and years ago, I trained a couple of rats to play basketball for the Johnny Carson show. And we never did use it, but that was the first time I'd ever. And you know what? Training rats is really a good place for people to start training, because what they're going to learn, they learn fairly quickly, and you can see how the training process works. Because it's not sometimes training takes longer, but with the rats, you can teach them something fairly quickly, and you go, oh wow, that was pretty cool, and then you can move on to other animals.
That's cool.
Yeah,
they're not as and also people aren't as emotional with the rats per se, right? Like in the pet dog training world, the more emotional you are, the more you spoil it.
I've seen people that are
effective your communication.
I'm
sure. Yeah, I'm sure you're right. I did have a pet rat named Delilah in college.
That's a fascinating point too, because I noticed that when we look into like who people consider the more modern day like godfathers of more positive based like reward training and things like that, they use lots of like rats and birds, and it wasn't just dogs and things that dog trainers would assume, right? And I've also read studies about how they were kind of gauging the difference with animals. So this was, I believe it was rats that, between.
Oh, like Skinner and
like B.F. Skinner, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And they were gauging things like how quickly a rat would pick up on something if you reward them every time they do it versus if you correct them one time for doing something they shouldn't do. And it was fascinating to see the learning capability and the way that you can structure lessons for rats.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is, one thing that Bryan talked about a little bit was that, being able to work with birds and cats there as well. And Bryan was a great bird trainer too, by the way. He was there's a picture on my website of him he trained a golden eagle on a TV. Was that a series? What is it? Commercial, Bryan? That gold? Oh, that was a Beastmaster, right?
Beastmaster was with the eagle.
The eagle, the golden eagle, yeah. But the thing that's nice about birds and cats is that it's straight food. There's no really emotional thing in there, and it's all about the paycheck. It's all about the food, but it really, really gets the animal into. And so, getting back to your thing about the B.F. Skinner and the whole behavior, all that,
right?
Truly, we call CR training, condition response training, CR training. That's true, pure CR training when it comes to birds and cats and things like that. Dogs are different, but the thing is with dogs is when you can do things not only CR training but other types of training, gentle manipulation, things like that that we need to do, then it just gives you a whole different world, which we'll talk about.
No, I would love it. Can we? I want to go into your story first, but I do want to go down that rabbit hole of those different terms, because these are terms not necessarily we hear in the pet dog training world, right? And I'd love to hear that breakdown of how it goes. But before we get into that, can you talk to us a little bit about your coming up in the aquatic animals? Was this at SeaWorld, you said?
Yeah. So what happened was my parents. I grew up in Southern California, and my parents used to take me to SeaWorld. Every summer. My parents were teachers. My dad was a coach, and so we would always go to San Diego every year. And finally, 12, 13, 14 years old, I wanted to be a trainer. I just watched them. I was so fascinated. I had my little dog Shadow. She's like 13 years old. I trained her. And I just want to become a killer whale trainer, a dolphin trainer. So I was the guy that kind of ran away with the circus. So I had enough credits to graduate high school early. I moved down there to pick up trash at SeaWorld.
Wow.
And I was like the lowest form of life you could be. That's, and I just bugged the director of training. Eventually they hired me working with birds and eventually with sea lions and dolphin sea lions and killer whales. So I was there from 76 to 83 off and on, basically. I had gone from 70, I actually was at Universal for a short time with Bryan. And then I went to SeaWorld and I came back in 1983. But once I left SeaWorld, there was another period of time after I left Universal for about 2 years where we contracted to all the Six Flags parks across the United States.
Wow.
And we had 13 dolphin shows. So I would transport dolphins. I would train dolphins, do a lot of the water work that we did with it. They didn't do a lot of water work. So I would do that in, Busch Gardens. We did Busch Gardens, Six Flags over Houston. We did Six Flags over Atlanta. We did. So
you guys were busy.
Stuff. Yeah, and I won the Behavior of the Year award. The International Marine Animal Trainers Association, they have the Behavior of the Year award. And I won the Behavior of the Year award where the dolphins pushed me to the bottom and shoot me out of the water. I just kind of trained it, called the triple bow in 1986. And so that was my little claim to fame. But that was my kind of swan song because once after 87, back in the movie, back up in the movie as a movie animal trainer and stuff. So,
right. So I have a question. Sorry, and now we go back to it. I remember SeaWorld used to be in a different place. It used to be in like Palos Verde. Was it not Palos Verde?
That was Marineland.
Marineland.
Yeah, and SeaWorld bought Marineland, but
that's what happened. And then now it's a resort.
Is it a resort or is it homes?
It's like it's a hotel because I went there. I went there on vacation last year, and I forget what the place is called, but it's it's right there where
it's in Palos Verde. It's right on the peninsula. It's beautiful. Yep. It's a beautiful location. But I was Marineland, and then SeaWorld bought them. They bought it, I think, in 86, right about when I was at Knott's Berry. I put the dolphin show to Knott's Berry Farm in 86, and it was right about that time.
Well, because that picture behind your head right there, maybe there's several that look like it. I could have sworn I saw that picture at the resort that I was at because they have like a hall of history of like what it used to be, and I wasn't sure if that was
these
you
were all SeaWorld. That's SeaWorld of San Diego and a lot of back of me.
A question for you then, Joel, is so I've noticed there are a few dog trainers out there who I've spoken to who started with aquatic animals. And if you had to guess, just not only with your experience then, but now with all the dog training experience that you have now, for a newer trainer, is there a certain sequence of animals that you think somebody should look into? Like, should they start with X and then move into Y? Like, if someone wanted to be the best dog trainer they can be.
I think my personal feeling is let me just do something. Let me just plug my computer in real quick. And I just
sure. No worries. Okay? No worries. Well, Bryan, same question.
There's something I learned pretty quickly at Universal Studios is there's in dog training, there's a big difference between a live show dog and a film dog.
Sorry about this. Will be a nice cut for you guys.
And the reason for that is a live show dog.
This will be a nice edit. A nice edit. Oh, anyways.
Sorry.
In answer to your question, my take is this, and that's not a knock on a lot of the marine mammal trainers that have made the move to dog training. From what I've seen, a lot of the marine mammal trainers that made the move to dog training have gone into the kind of positive only world or, purely positive and stuff. And anybody that knows anything about me knows that there's no question there are some good things about that type of training, but you can't hang your hat on that type of training for everything. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people that will stand and will draw this line and say, oh, we're only going to be positive. We're only going to do this. And it's like, that can work in certain situations, but not going to work in everyone. And and so most of the people that know me and follow me, one of the reasons they like me is the fact that I'm one of the few marine mammal trainers that made the move to dog training that understands the fact that, hey, there's positive reinforcement, there's negative reinforcement, there's things that you can do in a way and do it that way. And that's kind of why I wrote the books and everything.
That's super fascinating because I spoke with this must have been maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I spoke with someone who, him and his wife owned a dog training company in California. Because I'm from Cali too. I live in Phoenix now. And I called them, I think, like for a job. And their history was in training aquatic animals. I don't know if it was SeaWorld, but him and the wife had been like trainers for different aquatic animals. And what I found interesting was their philosophy online and what we spoke about on the phone and everything. I think the reason why they didn't hire me was because they were talking about learned helplessness as kind of like a good thing. It's hard to explain exactly as to how, but they were this interesting combination of, they weren't anti positive punisher, let's say, but they were anti certain tools like prong collars and and e-collar. I feel like being anti e-collar is more common, but they were anti prong collar, which was weird because they weren't anti like choke chain. So I just thought it was a little funky. And they were talking about they were like, okay, so there's this phenomenon in animals called learned helplessness, and why this is important and why this is helpful and this and this. And embarrassingly, I was just kind of like, yeah, okay. Like I'm just looking, and just kind of like agreeing, I guess, on the phone. And I look into it more after the fact, and I'm like, wait, no. We, as far as I understand, we don't want this. We want
learned helplessness is not the goal.
Is not something you want, right? Yeah. So yeah, I found that interesting because most aquatic animal trainers that I had met, I haven't noticed that they're like super pure positive only.
I have. I mean, when you take into consideration like Karen Pryor, right? I own a subscription to Karen Pryor online courses because there's a lot of, as any trainer, I learn stuff from other people. And the cool thing with online is no one has to know that you learn from them. You just buy their course. And there's so many great things that I pulled from Karen Pryor stuff. Whether it's clicker or just marker training in general, timing, reinforcement schedules, all that great stuff. But at the same time, there's a lot of stuff I disagree with, right? So to both Bryan and Joel's point, like you take stuff you like and you leave the stuff you don't, right?
Yeah, real quick on that, just, we're talking about this one thing is the fact that what I've seen sometimes is people will, when they'll cherry pick, they'll like you said, they'll use these terminology. Like I don't use like that terminology. What do you say?
Like reinforcement schedule.
Well, no,
markers.
Markers. Well, no, we do that. I mean, but there was something else you had said. The guys, the couple.
Oh, learned helplessness.
Learned helplessness. Like I mean, what is that? It's like
yeah.
Like we don't even we will get into real quick, and before we're done, Bryan and I will get into the whole marker thing because when people talk about markers, that people, and I know it sounds really funny, and I have this conversation in my seminars. People are into markers, which is great. Okay. Mm-hmm. We don't use them on the set. Okay. And we don't use them. So if you talk to movie animal trainers, you say even the word marker, they have no idea what you're talking about. Okay.
Right.
We don't use a marker because our dogs will do 50 things on the set and we can't talk to them. Okay.
Right.
And we don't want the dog watching us. So if you give a dog a marker, and we'll talk about it hopefully a little bit later, but if you give a dog a marker, they're going to look at you. Okay. Anyways. And so we don't want that. And so there's a flow that we create on the set as movie animal trainers. So we don't. I know it sounds kind of funny, and then this people are gonna be like,
"No, it's fascinating."
It makes total sense, and it's something I wondered. So I definitely want to hear more about that. But I guess just to kind of finish out the question. So you notice then that marine animal trainers tend to be of the pure positive camp. So if you were to, in your opinion, then what would be a great thing to look into for someone wanting to get into dog training? Would they just start with dogs? Is there something else?
I would say I would start starting with dogs, and I would say looking at the people that work in positive reinforcement. Don't hang your hat on that for everything.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So in training behaviors in general, my style of training has always been, I think Bryan, you talk to Bryan, ask him the same thing. Mm-hmm. If we're training a behavior, you're using something that is very, very motivating to the animal, using positive reinforcement to train the behavior. Yep. And that's why I wrote in my book, Controlled and Uncontrolled Training Environments, because there are two environments.
Right.
And one of the reasons I wrote that in chapter 9 in my More What Colors Your Dog book was because a lot of the positive only trainers, what they do is they get hung up into, okay, we're only going to dog a treat. If the dog makes a mistake, we give the dog a chance to repeat it. Yeah, that is exactly what we do when we're training a behavior, whether it's an intermediate, advanced, or basic behavior. Right. We're using a treat. Hey, the quicker you do this, the quicker you get a treat. You make a mistake, give you another shot because we know you want it. We know you want this thing.
Right.
However, that's a controlled environment. The uncontrolled environment is we're not working with the animal. Dog is on a leash. Your dog lunges in front of you. You're not training the dog.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Jumping up on people, barking aggressively, agitation, counter surfing. Barking out the window. Are you working the dog? No. So their world, the positive only world, is like saying, well, we're not going to reinforce it. And it's like, well, you're wrong because he's being reinforced right now because
by the environment.
The completion of the action is a reward.
Right. It's intrinsically rewarding.
Playing out the action. And if you allow that, and a lot of the positive only people say, we're just going to ignore it. Well, in your world, yeah, that's fine, but it's not a human, it's a dog. Okay?
Right.
And it's a high prey drive dog.
Right.
And so that's where the difference is. And that's why I wrote And that's why I wrote in chapter 9, the uncontrolled environments, and a lot of the positive only trainers will 180 too, by the way. They'll look at that and they'll go, that does make sense. I'm like, well, do you actually think that that's not reinforcing to the dog, jumping up on somebody? He's getting something out of it. So anyways, that's the idea.
Well, can I ask the same question to Bryan? If somebody wanted to get into dog training today and they wanted to be the best dog trainer they could possibly be, would you recommend that they start with dogs, or is there something else?
Yeah, I would start with your dog. I mean, that's not a problem at all. Training is training, and it's like I said before, it's pretty common sense. You guide your dog into the behavior, and you reward them for it. And it's whether it's a ball or a rag or food or just good boy and all that stuff. That's all a reward. As a matter of fact, I was working a dog on a set, and the dog is supposed to be dead, and there's a cover over him, and it's a very unemotional thing where the two kids come up and blah, blah, blah. And so I had my dog lie down and stay there. And when they pulled the covers off, they saw him and did their dialogue, put the covers on. And for his reward, what I did was, as soon as they cut, I let my dog up and play with the blanket. He loved it. He just wanted to. And I had a crew guy come up to me one time and says, "Wow, your dog's doing really great. Why don't you reward him for that?" And I said, "What do you think that is?" He's loving it. It doesn't have to be a food reward. It doesn't have to be a ball. It can be a rag. I mean, there's a lot of things involved in training. And what I was saying before, the difference between a live show dog and a film dog is a world of difference, because a live show dog is looking at you and they're only a couple of feet away and you can work them. When you what we're going to teach in our course for film training is that we're going to create a distance between you and the dog so you can work at a distance. And also we're going to teach you how to let your dog look natural and not a robot that's doing something. A lot of these things are so important in the film business. A lot of people who train dogs, especially obedience trainers and all that, they don't know how to get these specific behaviors like acting natural and not looking at the trainer, looking at the action. And the most important thing that we're going to teach in film business is, where is the dog looking while it's being filmed? You will watch, if you turn down the sound on some of these like commercials or whatever, you'll see the dog is looking completely off from the action or the actor. And that is so important. We're going to teach that.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Here's a question that I ask all of our guests. I'm noticing with you guys an attitude that I personally find very conducive, not only in training, but in life in general. And I've got to ask, we were talking about some people that had shaped both of you, including each other, in your training careers. Who are some of your mentors in life in general? They don't have to have been animal trainers, just people who you've looked up to.
Oh, wow. Whoa, that's an interesting one. Bryan, I'll let you go first. I got to think about that.
I would say my uncle in the very beginning when I was learning to train, Ray Berwick, and someone who was very, very, very special in my life and taught me a lot about life, which pertains to training, because he taught me how to deal with people. And dealing with people, if you treat them with respect and love, you can get a lot out of them. And this person taught me the same thing with animals, and that was Michael Landon. He was the greatest person I've ever met.
Landon. My mom had the biggest crush on Michael Landon.
Yeah, I mean, and Joel,
he's the man.
And Joel, while you're thinking of your answer, here's why I ask if this helps you, because just from what we've spoken about so far, it's only been like 25 minutes, is just you guys, the things that you've said so far that stick out to me are your ability to take what you liked from something you're learning and disregard what you don't like. You have this kind of innate filter, and you have enough confidence in your instinct to use it, because a lot of people don't. They're smart enough to see what they don't like, but they do it anyway, or whatever the case, right? Like, people ignore red flags. And also, you guys seem to have this natural kind of like joie de vivre, I guess. You're like upbeat and fun, which it sounds so simple, but a lot of people have a hard time with it. I do sometimes too. So I guess, if that helps.
I mean, you guys are in the motivation business,
Yeah.
It's about motivation.
In answer to your question, there are a couple of people that I look at that really, as far as my career, that really helped me a lot in my career. Number one, or that I really looked at, the one person I will tell you, Bryan, I'll repeat because I worked on, we did a lot of Highway to Heaven episodes with Michael, because Mike Landon wrote, produced, directed, and starred in the shows. And we shot in Malibu near his house. And we shot like short days, and the guy was just great. So I would say, I was so impressed because he directed, and he would direct these emotional scenes. So he'd say action, and then he'd have to get really heavy. I mean, it was amazing that he could do it. And this is the guy who's producing the show and everything like that. And it was just like, it was and the way, and Bryan will tell you, I mean, the way he treated people was just funny guy, had great personality, and stuff. And he died just so young. And it's just, and that's the sad part. That's just the sad part too. And then the other guy, there was a guy, I've never mentioned this before, but I'm going to mention it. His name was Thad Lasinik, and he was a director, like the director of training at SeaWorld, especially in Ohio. When I was in Ohio, SeaWorld of Ohio was open half the year. And I would spend a couple summers in Ohio, and then I would winter in San Diego. And he came from Florida, but he trained more killer whale trainers than any other trainer. He groomed more killer whale trainers than anybody living. We did a lot of water work with the animals and stuff. And I learned a ton from this guy. And this guy was a great trainer. A lot. Any killer whale or dolphin trainer that ever worked with will tell you about this guy. So I learned a lot, because a lot of my techniques that I use to this day come from working with killer whales and dolphins and stuff.
Yeah, I just looked him up on LinkedIn. Thad Lasinik. He's the owner of Precision Behavior. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, this guy.
He contracts. He does a little contracts, but he's really, really good. And he's been on a lot of. You'll see his name. You'll see him on a lot of the stuff that came up when with the whole Free Willy thing, which was just a joke. That whale should have died and been released and stuff. And he was very vocal about the fact that animal should never have been ever released and stuff.
So
you dove, if I'm not mistaken, you said you even graduated high school early and then dove straight into training, right, with SeaWorld.
Yeah. I started picking up trash. Actually, I picked up trash before I even graduated. I spent one summer down there, living down there, just picking up trash. And I went and I finished out my senior year, and then I continued. And I tell people in my seminars, how many of you have kids that will want to graduate early from high school to pick up trash for, I think I was making like $3.25 an hour or something like that, to pick up trash to do my dream, And how many people would back your kids? And I look at people in the audience, and they're just like skips, shaking their heads going, I don't know.
But see, that's that confidence that I want to know where you got it. Is not a lot of people have that, Well,
they all laughed at me. All my friends laughed at me in junior high school and high school and said I'd never do it. They would have said I'd never do it, and I just want to prove them wrong. And the greatest thing was I'm doing the Killer Whale show, and that's like you would do the show after I was there for a couple of years or whatever, and we'd sit on the rocks after the show, and I was like 21 years old, whatever, and my friends came down from California there. You just done the show, you spend all the time in the water with the whale, and you're out on the rock, sitting on the rocks talking to people as they leave. You're all wet and everything. And your friends coming up to you, God, you did it, man. You did it. We all laughed at you, and you said, I was like, yeah.
And see, guys, something that I really appreciate in both of you, and I have another question for Bryan here in a second, is this bravery, this whatever it is you guys kind of remind me of this life lesson that I try to keep in mind is it's not that there's anything special about it's just you just have to do it, and you can accomplish some amazing things. Like, so there will be times where Brent and I will be on the phone. We talk every day easily, right?
Yep.
So we'll be on the phone together, either recapping the podcast or what we're going to do in the future, and we'll kind of we'll go over things like, we asked this question. Was it Larry? No, it was Michael. No, it was Tyler. No, and we kind of like accidentally go through a catalog of guests that we've interviewed, and we're like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like, and it's really fun to have people reach out and oh, you guys have interviewed all these trainers, and it sounds like such an accomplishment. And I'm just like, well, we're just some dudes with microphones and like kind of nothing to do this morning. So, but I love the just do it mentality. And I guess my question for you, Bryan, then is Joel's intro to training was so like clear from the jump, but you served in the Army. I would love to know a little bit more about your
you made those
beginnings.
jumps.
Yeah, like what led you to want to go, or were you drafted, or what was the deal there?
I honestly, I wrote about this in my autobiography, but around 1967, I was in a gang and doing all the bad things that we did back then. And I was arrested for something I didn't do. But in retrospect, there were a lot of things I did do that I didn't get arrested for. So, it worked out. After I did my time,
It balances itself.
and after I did my time, the same two police officers who arrested me pulled me over the day I got out of jail and put me up against the car and told me that if I didn't get out of the gang, they'd make sure I was dead or in prison. And when that, it took me a few days to realize that, I got to get out of this. Now, I had no money, and the gang was my family. So it's tough to get out of that situation. And fortunately for me, there was a little thing called Vietnam going on, and it took me 3 tries.
A little thing.
It took me 3 tries and a little over 6 months before the Army refused to take me twice, and they finally took me. And I did because of my police record, which was kind of ironic in the sense that I had no bad things on it. The only problems I had were fighting. I always thought that was kind of ironic that the Army didn't want to take me because I fought. Which
because you wanted to fight,
I would think would be
you're like, that's what I'm supposed to.
Yeah, a plus. But anyway, after my I received 5 medals, and I had an honorable discharge. I came out as a sergeant, and I got into the accident, and my uncle gave me a job cleaning cages, and I had no aspiration, which is really funny because my dad was a stuntman in silent comedies back in, he was quite a bit older. And from the stunt world, he went into animal training and was very prominent. He started Rudd Weatherwax, who did Lassie. He started Frank Inn, who did Benji. And I kind of did the opposite. I became an animal trainer and then went into the stunt world after that.
I saw that. I saw that you were credited with stunt work. It was a good, 6-7 years, something like that?
About 30.
Oh, 30? Oh, my goodness.
I did my very first stunt for Kent Bateman, who's the father of Jason Bateman, about 1975. And I was good friends with Jason for quite a while. He would come up and watch the filming that his dad was directing and hang around with me and my eagle. And then I actually worked with him on Little House on the Prairie. And I also worked with him on a TV series called Valerie. And what a cool guy. It's sorry that I fell out of contact with him. I'd love to talk to him again, but he's a really cool guy.
Yeah, that's amazing. Sorry, I wanted to bring up something a little bit more emotional because it's we see this pattern, especially with dog trainers and successful dog trainers and people who are still doing it till this day. Me personally, dogs. When I was really, really young, I started when I was 18, but dogs gave me kind of it's weird when you jump into a field that fulfills you in a different way than maybe other jobs that you did, and dog training for me has always allowed me to be with dogs, obviously, but allowed me to be a teacher, allowed me to be a student, allowed me to be an innovator, allowed me to be a networker, allowed me to be all of these things that when I was a kid, I was naturally good at. So that job of being a dog trainer, and obviously I've taken my career different than the people I train next to, but it gave me a lane to drive as fast as I want and fulfill me and make me feel good and all that stuff. And anytime we interview dog trainers who maybe had a bad past or maybe were part of gangs or had bad upbringings, somehow dogs help them find this new path. And I think that's really, really cool. And I don't know, just something I wanted to notice because it's we don't always have the same upbringings or the ideal upbringings, but dogs help kind of give us grounding, and animals help us, find this passion. And would you guys agree with that story?
Yeah. Dog. When you have a dog, when I train a dog, I get really into them, and I can't. I'm not able to train a bunch of dogs for a kennel. Like when I have a dog, I really get into them, and I love them a lot, and they live with me and they stay with me, and it's unconditional. It's someone, a dog loves you for who you are. They don't care what you look like, whether you have a disability or not. And that's why they use dogs, for all these different purposes. They take them into hospitals and things like that, because it's just an unconditional love. It's just plain and simple. And a lot of people, like myself, growing up, you don't get that. There was a lot of problems if you read my book, you'd find out that a lot of my younger adult years was more like a Cheech and Chong movie than anything, and that's and it's just because you're doing all those things and there's nobody guiding you along. A dog is just, you can love him. He's there, unconditional.
Yeah. How about you, Joel? Other than like just passion, because you were passionate about this at a young age, did animals help you ground yourself?
Yeah, unlike Bryan, I had a great, I had a really, really good upbringing. Thank goodness. My dad was a coach, and my mom was, but I was a bit of a loner. Even in junior high school and high school, I played football and stuff like that. I played football. I was still a bit of a loner. And going back to junior high school in 7th grade, the dog Shadow gave me the opportunity, this dog I had, and she was really afraid of everything. And I just kind of started working with her, and she became this dog that I trained and everything. And I was like 12, 13 years old, but she became my world, you know what I mean? And I just, and it became my closeness and my kind of security blanket, as well. So that's kind of, that's what it did. That's what it did for me as a kid. I love that. Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's amazing, guys. I wanted to ask you, I was reading through both of your credits, and I would love to know a little bit of the difference working with a dog on a set on screen versus the work you have to do off screen.
Okay. One of the things, are you talking about like comparing it to like the obedience type world?
Yes.
Okay. Big difference. And that's a huge difference. And one thing Bryan was saying that I just want to touch on, I'll let Bryan continue, but everything that people do, and I talk about this in my seminars, is I explain to people, it's like, listen, we're not reinventing the wheel. Whatever you're doing with your dog in that environment, like they use, for example, an implied stay, okay? And that's great. They use markers, and that's great. And those are all things, if I lived in the world they lived in, that's what I would do. But that's not the world we live in. We need to have dogs looking natural. There needs to be a lot of gray. The dog needs to move side to side. There needs to be flow. It's not moving. It's not looking towards us. It's actually moving side to side, watching people, watching this actor, going with this actor, picking this up, going that direction. There has to be a flow. You can't do that if you haven't trained your dog to stay. You can't do that if you're relying on markers, And so that's really the big difference that we do. And I'll let Bryan continue with that.
Oh, did you just throw that to me?
Yeah, I wanted to just tossed you the LA.
I was listening.
We'll cut the dead air. Don't worry.
I didn't want to hug it, but I figured you've got some stuff to say. That difference between the private.
Well, I'm sorry, I had a hard time hearing it because of the echo, so I didn't really know what the question was. So, what are you talking about?
So the question, the question was, if you could just get a little bit into some of the differences for the younger trainers listening. How do you work with a dog on screen versus you being off screen?
Versus, I guess what he's saying, Bryan, also he was asking about like the difference between the obedience world
and the film training world, right?
The film training world.
It's something funny. I used to work on a TV series back in the 80s, and the comment was, instead of watching the dog, they loved watching me work the dog from off screen. Because I was extremely animated, and a lot of times you have to be to get the mood right of the dog, to get them working right. So there's a lot to I think one of something that we haven't hit on yet, but emotions, it runs very high when you're working your dog. And there's a lot of times on film where the dog has to act and show emotion. And a lot of people don't understand that. But this is another thing that we're going to teach in our course is how to use emotions to, for instance, if say there's a scene where the director wants the dog to come in and put his head down on a leg, who's a person who's sitting on the couch. Oh, okay, you can do that. Well, wait a minute. What is the person thinking on the couch? Are they really happy? Are they really sad? You don't. If they're really sad, you don't want your dog bounding in there and, hey, how you doing? And
Right.
You're going to bring them in nice and slow, put their head down, have them look up at the actor. So you have to. You're acting through your dog, just like actors are acting through them. So you have to have those emotions.
That's something interesting because in pet dog training, I always tell my clients, you have to generate the emotion that you want your dogs to have. And it's the exact same principle that you're teaching in movies. That's because they're so connected to us,
Well, here's a question for you guys is I've heard those stories of actors, human actors who get so into a role that it's almost hard to break back out of it, right? To the point of even like depressions and things like that. Like I think of like Daniel Day-Lewis and like Heath Ledger and stuff like that. Does acting sad take an emotional toll on the dog?
No. An actor, when you're working on a film, an actor can make or break you when you're working. Because if the actor does not like animals or does not like the dog, you see that on film. You cannot hide that. But if an actor that I had on the Rin Tin Tin show, the Canine Cop show that we did, the actor who played the cop, he loved the dog. He loved the dog so much that I could work the dog using him and not. As a matter of fact, I wrote an episode where he gets pinned and the dog is blind from a flash blind, and we put a bandana on him because I knew I could work the dog blind, and I didn't think anybody else could ever do that. So I had the actor actually directing the dog to pick up different things that the dog could not see it. But this actor was so good, he could work the dog. So, and the same thing happens with directors. If the director loves a dog, it's a sweet deal. But if the director is like, oh, I don't really direct animals, but here you go. It's tough. It's very tough. So a director can make or break you too. And we're explaining a lot of these things in the course that these people need to know when you're going to get on a set and work your dog.
And I feel like whenever I hear people talk about different seminar circuits from different trainers, it's usually those things that people say they benefit from the most. I mean, certainly when you're dealing with trainers who have such a unique take on something, it's so interesting to be able to look at dog training from such a different lens. But also little things like that, like letting someone know how to work with a director, how to work with maybe a difficult actor, maybe how to, just these like logistical things. I think that's where that, like, if I went to one of those seminars, what you just said would be like, whoa, to me.
Yeah. Some of those things would inspire, like, maybe I should change fields.
Well, one of the things that Bryan said too was that when you're working with that director and I've had the opportunity to work with, thank goodness, just some awesome directors. But the last feature I worked on, the last movie I did, it was a movie called The Good Year with Russell Crowe. Ridley Scott directed it. It was in France, southern France. And I brought this Jack Russell I trained. And this is like 16 years ago, 17 years ago now, 17 years ago, I guess. And the dog's supposed to be in 3 scenes. And I get out there, I'm going to be out there for 2 months, so I meet Ridley Scott, and I didn't know anything about Ridley Scott. And I'm like, okay, this guy is the top director, right, on features. And I do primarily, my niche was commercials. I did a lot of commercial work, big commercials and stuff like that. And I did a couple of big TV series, but it was primarily that. So here I get in this feature, and I just meet him and I'm like, hey, I have this Jack Russell. And he goes, hey, I wrote this Jack Russell in because I love Jack Russells. I have a couple, you know, he goes, and I said, so I worked the dog and had to do some behaviors. And I said, listen, I'm here every day. So if you want to call me to the set, I'll be more than happy to come and work the dog. So there were 3 scenes the dog had originally set. One, just a random scene, I was there. Another one where he goes after Russell Crowe's leg, bites his leg. Another one where he lifts his leg and pees on, or she trained her leg to, I lift her leg, trained to lift her leg and pee on Russell Crowe. So, and then, but anyways, every day he saw me, he's like, hey, Joel, can we have the dog do this? Can we have the dog chase the tractor? The dog is in like 24 scenes in the movie. It's in a huge chunk of the movie. And he wrote this letter, a really cool letter to me after the movie, and gave me this big bottle of Dom Perignon. Russell Crowe gave me a really cool shirt from Australia, the soccer shirt, you know, from
that's cool.
And they both were just, and we just had a great time. And they, you know, my last scene, everybody clapped and everything for the dog and stuff because we left her, we were done a little early, we wrapped early. But having him do that, money's great and everything, but having a director like that, like Bryan will tell you, that's it. That's what life is about, you know?
Yeah. Everyone has a paycheck, right? And sometimes it's an emotional one. And sometimes it's just feeling that you did good work and knowing that you did a good job and you did your best and people appreciated it. And in essence, it's almost like helping, like I helped that movie happen. It's not even about the status, it's much more like, look what we did together.
And when you're working with a director that is thinking about writing dogs in, you're doing such a good job. They're thinking about writing rather than you coming in there and just being such a pain in the ass. They're like, oh gosh, how do we get rid of him? How do we get rid of the dog? You know, it's like, you know.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of working with actually not Ridley, but his son Jake and his dogs in the past. And I mean, I love his son, so I assume Ridley's pretty cool too.
Great guy.
Yeah, I love that. I wanted to ask a couple questions to try and bridge the pet dog training world with the Hollywood dog training, right? The Hollywood dog training thing for me was always kind of weird because I was like, does that mean that they're training in Hollywood? Does that mean that are the dogs famous, or are the people of the people whose dogs are famous? Like, what makes it a Hollywood dog trainer? So my question for you is, in pet dog training, there was a lot learned from William Keeler, right? That they would take. And I don't know how influential he is in modern day set training, but I know back in the 50s and 40s, like that, he was the guy. I mean, at least he wrote the books. That's all I know. Is there any influence, or do people in the movie industry, do they care about what Keeler was talking about back then? Or is that pretty old, outdated stuff?
No, they don't care.
They don't care. Okay, cool.
They don't. They seriously. I'll answer. I'm glad he said that. Yeah, it's exactly. They don't care. Cool. They don't care. Yeah. Nobody cares.
Yeah. That's probably
what they do care about. What we do care about are the movie animal trainers, and we call it movie animal trainers as well.
Cool.
Movie animal. The trainers that Bryan had the opportunity to work with Frank in, he'll tell you talk about that. You know, Frank in, Ray Berwick, who we learned from. Ray, the thing about those guys is what back in those days, what we'll tell you is in the 70s, when a lot of it was aversive, a lot of training was aversive back then. These were the trainers that were using positive reinforcement, the very few that were using positive reinforcement, because a lot of trainers back then were using a lot of aversives. You know?
Right.
And Bryan, Bryan was, living that world in the 70s. So
well, Bryan, I wanted to ask you a similar question consider this in addition to that question. As we look back on the decades of dog training and how it's evolved, do you think, or to what extent do you think popular culture with how people treat people played an impact on how we treated our dogs?
I think if what you're asking is if it helps training your dogs to if that helps in relationships with other humans, is that what you're asking?
The other way.
I guess I'm looking back through the years, like we were talking about, Keeler method and how dog training has evolved from one thing to another as time went on. And I wonder how much human popular culture played a role in that.
The dog training has come a long way from, say, the 30s and 40s. A lot of trainers were especially trainers who were of European descent. They were very heavy-handed in training. It was there was a lot of negative and some reward. Now it's much more reward than negative, and that has a lot to do with what has happened with the human race from then to now. We are treating people better. We understand that, or well, at least most of us do understand that we try to give the benefit of the doubt. We try not to get angry so much. And this has a lot to do with dogs and dog training. We've learned throughout the years that training positively and giving the dog the chance is much more rewarding, and you'll get a lot further along in training than you would if you were a very heavy-handed person. The same way we're learning now to maybe treat people a little bit differently and give them the benefit of the doubt. So if I'm hoping that might answer your question.
That was spot on.
It does. And I guess my question then for Joel is, are there any particular things that have happened throughout this time frame that you think really help push that narrative? Like as an example, I noticed that something that maybe wasn't as popular back then as it is now is something like a Tony Robbins, like a life guru type thing. You know, what major impacts on human society do you think really helped push dog culture in that direction?
I think kind of like Bryan said, I mean, I think people have learned to be more patient with each other, more
compassionate
receptive to each other, compassionate. And I do think that, that the clicker training, and, I'm not a big fan of using clickers on dogs, but the whole clicker thing and that positive reinforcement, that's that really built, really got people to take, if you think of, like, I've spoken at so many, like the IACP conference, for example.
Right.
And I remember speaking 10 years ago I was in Texas. I think I was speaking in Texas, maybe more than 10 years ago, maybe like 11 or 12 years ago. And I spoke in Texas, and I remember talking to a guy, and he said, he was an e-collar guy, which I'm a huge fan of e-collars. I'm a huge fan. And, he goes, I'll use an e-collar, and in the same session, I'm using a clicker on the dog, 30 seconds later, use another big, and that's to me, and that's really what's happened and what's transpired. That didn't happen, right.
Like the blending of techniques, of techniques.
Hey, one thing I just want to mention to you guys too, which is a good example, is Bryan talked about, is that giving the dog a chance. Our world, the world we live in, as moving animal trainers and stuff, is when we train behaviors, we give a dog a chance. They're working for a treat. They want this treat. A good example is, and this is, and people that might be listening, this might be one of the people that I'm talking about, but people have a leash on the dog. Okay. Now we might have a leash on the dog. We want the dog to jump up on this elevated area. We're going to guide him up on this elevated area. Okay. We're going to give him a chance to come up in this elevated area. Give him a chance to come up there. If he delays a little bit, we're still going to give him a chance to come up. There are certain people on the very first session, they're going to take that leash and
crank it up,
right. or not even crank it, even tap, and make him get up there. That's okay. All right. But you're not giving the dog a chance to think
and figure it out.
And that world they live in, and that little world, that pull.
Yeah.
That is what they use for everything. And when you do that, the dog never gets a chance to think for himself.
And that's the same with people. That's the same with people. It's like some people do what's expedient, and like that's the fastest way. Compulsion and force is the fastest way to do stuff. Like
you'll get it, and you just hit it perfectly. You just hit it perfectly. Is there's always a price you pay for speed. Yep. If you want to get it quick, I tell people all the time, you want to get something quick, you want to get a retrieve really fast, you're going to get a retrieve quicker than me. But I will guarantee you my retrieve in 6 months is going to look my dogs are going to be way happier than your dog. You just basically cranked on the dog and just made that dog just cranked on his ear or whatever you did to get it.
Yeah, I mean, even in pet dog training, like one thing I know we both do in both of our fields is sendaways, right? Or sending them to spots or places or whatever. And so, like, I remember when I used to teach a place with more like pressure, like negative reinforcement stuff. The dog would go, but he'd go reluctantly. And then as soon as I started doing sendaways from 2 feet, click treat, 3 feet, click treat, 5 feet, click treat, I can send a dog to place from 20 yards away. You know what I mean? So when you let the dog figure out the puzzle and they get rewarded by their dopamine and their serotonin and all their feel good chemicals, like it's definitely a better way to get the consistency and also the look. And I know that's important for you guys too.
Well,
and I want to start bridging the gap a little.
No, I was going to say, I mean, when you're talking about training a dog and like we both said, allowing your dog to learn and to make the choice and giving the dog time to do that, why would you even want to yank the dog around or anything? I mean, why do you even want to do that? This is your friend, your buddy. I mean, like my dogs at home, when I was working in the business, they were my buddies. They slept with me. They ate with me. They played with me, and we were partners in our job. I mean, so, and actually one of the things that drove me, I think, more to doing the stunt work and kind of leaning back on the animal training was after I lost my last dog from cancer. It hurt so bad because they're not kennel dogs. They're your pets, your friend, your partner.
Right.
And when you lose something like that, it hurt me so bad that I just went, I can fall down and break something and it'll repair and I'm okay, but if using the dog, that hurt more than people. So why in the world would you want to force and hurt and treat something badly to train them when you don't have to? You can train them.
Can I give you I'll give you the answer that I feel, because I think Brent and I agree with you, and I think it's in the pet dog training world. It is this newer shift to give dogs opportunity to actually think, as weird as that sounds. And I think that the answer that a lot of pet dog trainers who still need to learn that lesson is because they either get so tied up in the technical correctness of training, right? Oh, well, the dog didn't do it, so I had to go. And they kind of go through the process of like, say, no, correct, or they aren't comfortable yet in their expertise with many dogs, including the one they're currently working, to see what happens, I guess. Like something I really have to work on with my personal training assistants and with clients, and is I have to stop them from stopping the dog. So, for example, I was working place, they'll put a dog on a bed or an elevated bed and have them lay down and stay. And my most experienced training assistant, she puts the dog in place. It's a puppy. She's doing a lot of food work on a 20-foot leash. The dog goes on, lays down. 2 seconds later, gets up on the bed and starts to walk off. She immediately says, no, rounds the corner of the bed. So she's now in front of the dog. So he stops and lays back down because she's in his way, right? And I watched her do it a few times in a row, and then I stopped her for a second and was like, hey, listen, I get what you're doing. I get why you're stopping him. He's staying on the bed. Like, I can see why this is technically appropriate, right? Or in your head anyway. But the problem is, I'm not sure that he's learning the word no. You're just kind of stopping him because you're in the way. Yeah. And something I have to tell clients all the time is, I'm much more impressed if you guys want to be clear as opposed to fast. Meaning, if you say no, and then the dog gets all the way off the bed, I don't care. I'm not in a rush. Say no, then put him back on, re-ask for the place. But I noticed that, like, sometimes people's handler skill, like, you can physically stop the dog, gets in the way of their ability to teach the dog what the dog actually needs to learn.
Yeah, a couple things. It's like that whole adage of like, if you have to force it, you're probably doing something wrong, kind of thing. It's that whole thing. How much does? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. You were going to say something, Joel?
Yeah. And I guess, and again, the world that we come from, I say we all the time. I talk for Bryan because I know we do it the same way. Bryan, and has said this over and over again. I say it all over and over again. They don't know how to do it right if they don't do it wrong.
Right.
Let them make the mistake. Let them jump off the bed so you can guide them back up the bed on the bed. And it's like, let them screw up.
Yep.
And there's so many people that are so afraid. It's like, especially with that stay. And I teach
they're so afraid. Yep. That's
certification courses. I go, we start stepping back. We do time and distance. Time is how long dog's staying. Now we start stepping back. Dog is okay. I tell people, when you take that one step back,
just chill.
One step back. If it jumps up, you're just going to bring it back up. That's it. That's it. But it's not please, please, please stay. It's not please, please. It's like, hey, if you stay there, great. If you don't, you know what? I'm going to guide you back up.
People think the dog's failure is their failure.
Yeah. And Bryan, if you want to say something there, I know you're all over that too.
I think that a lot of people, people who really don't know how to train their dogs, who are trying to train their dogs, try to move too fast, and and ask any coach in football, especially when you get into high school. Learn the basics. You have to learn the basics. So instead of trying to advance your dog to some things, teach them the basics so they know what stay means. They know when I'm training a dog and I'm teaching a stay, I do it in the living room while I'm watching TV. I'll have the dog stand and stay. That's it. Just stay there. And when the dog breaks to stay, no, come on over here, stay there. So they learn to stay. I'll have them sit and stay. I'll have them lie down and stay. And I'll have them lie down and stay for 5 minutes while I'm watching TV. No, just stay there. And they learn it. And some of the advanced stuff that we want to teach for film work, you have to know the basics. And especially for working a dog on a film set, they have to know hand signals. They have to know vocal commands. And you can't go too fast with this. So when I'm working the dog, and I'll put them up on the table so they're elevated, and I'll just work them straight with vocal commands. I won't use any hand signals at all. I'll sit. Sit. Very good. That's a good boy. So they're learning everything. A lot of people they try to use their hand signal and their vocal command at the same time. And they never get both. So if you're working a dog away from you and he can't really see you, but you want the dog to sit, they're looking for a hand signal. So these things take time. You don't learn that right away. And you have to take the time to train your dog. Don't try to go too fast. If you do, you're going to not have the basics, and your dog is going to mess up, and you're going to have to go backwards now and start teaching the basics.
Hey guys, thank you so much for listening to Dog Trainers Podcast. You know what's a great way to support this podcast? By becoming a sponsor today. With sponsoring the podcast, you'll be helping us make this show the best it can be, and so much more. From hosting more local events, traveling throughout the country, and connecting with trainers from around the world, ultimately getting you, the listener, more of the content that you love. For more information, please contact us at dogtrainerspodcast@gmail.com or visit our Instagram page at dogtrainerspodcast. Thank you guys, and now back to the show.
So you just made a very fascinating point, and I want to start bridging the worlds between film dog training and the seminar work that you guys currently do, and into more like teaching. Most of the trainers who come to the seminars, I imagine, are more like pet dog trainers. Yeah. Something I'm learning lately in humans is people learn in different ways. Like people learn optimally in different ways. Like the old IQ model of how like intelligent someone is, if I'm not mistaken, is outdated now. Now there are like 6 or 7 major learning styles, and people learn better in one way versus another, right? So not everybody learns the same in every way. Yeah. So
auditory, visual,
right? Like auditory, visual, and I bring that up because Bryan was talking about the vocal command versus the hand signal. So I'm like, okay, so it is important to make sure that the dog learns it in an audible way and in a visual way and in a tactile way, like maybe like gentle leash pressure, and so it's fascinating to kind of go through all the different learning styles in order to round out the one dog, right, or the one client, or the one whatever the case. And I feel like luckily
the one trainer. Right?
The one trainer, or luckily that's slowly spilling into the pet dog training world, is giving dogs time to make choices teaching them in several different ways. And in order to teach them in several different ways, people understand now more the importance of giving the dog the time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, something you said too is teaching them in different ways, and Bryan will tell you the same thing, and that is that's why I wrote the book, What Color is Your Dog? My first one and my second one. But it's train your dog based on personality, because reds and oranges are more high-strung, greens and blues are more timid, yellow is the center of the spectrum. Your dog eventually will move kind of towards the center of the spectrum, but if you have a high-strung dog, a red or orange dog, which is reactive, very reactive, maybe into toys, balls, whatever, just, crazy, you can use training collars on them, and you need training collars for them. That's great. But when you're dealing with a yellow dog, a mellow yellow, a green, which is timid, or a blue afraid dog, you don't need training collars on those dogs, and everything is going to be different. The way you walk, talk, move, reward, correct, tools you use, everything you do is like night and day. But it all starts with getting to know that individual dog you're working with and understand really where does he fit in that world.
Right.
Something else.
Totally.
In the training, when you're teaching a dog and training the dog, they start to learn how to learn. So once you're teaching something, then it's easier to teach something else, because they're going, oh, okay, he's showing me. And once you really let them know that you're my buddy, you're the best thing in the world, and when you do these things that I'm asking you to do, I'm just going to love you and give you everything that I can. They start to learn quicker. But again, you need to take your time. And it's just like kids in a school. I mean, in grammar school, they're starting to learn how to learn. And then when you get into high school and college, is someplace I forgot to go to, you learn that you have learned how to learn, and now you can learn much easier. And that's how you can advance to more difficult behaviors. But again, the basics, you have to teach the basics, and that teaches them to learn how to learn.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a good foundation. The dog needs to learn how to learn. Doesn't matter what style of training you're doing. They got to know. I had a question for Joel, and actually both of you guys. So when I went to Joel's seminar that he did with Larry Krohn and Jay Jack, we had a little side talk, and Joel was like, yeah, most of these people don't know who the hell I am because 90% of the people there are pet dog trainers, right? Like they want to do behavior stuff, or they want to do aggression. They want to deal with those types of cases and help with their clients. So Larry Krohn and Jay Jack, they have more of that field covered. But there is so much that I'm taking from the seminar and also from this particular episode, that there is so much that pet dog trainers can learn from the film work, right? And I want to ask you guys what you think some really important principles from set dog training what principles would help younger dog trainers doing pet dog training, because ultimately, like as we said with our interview with Jay Jack the other day, I think the more you learn about dog training in general, the better you're going to get with dogs, the better you're going to get with your clients, the better you're going to get in just your career. So that's always been my belief. What are some principles that you guys think would be helpful for pet dog trainers that you guys specialize in?
Well, I think that, and the people that know me, and like I say, know me, they know me from Animal Planet, my show on, show on Animal Planet, stuff like that, or TV and things like that. But I remember our conversation, and as I said, I mean, most of the people that come there are, real world. These are real world dog trainers that they don't get a second take. In with their dog. One of the things I tell people all the time that I like to focus on is there's a lot of things that are done where they'll use yes or whatever, and a lot of times yes becomes kind of like a final bridge. Basically, it's a release. Sometimes it is a release.
Yeah, it's a terminal.
And it's terminal marker. And so Bryan and I teach a lot of different types of markers. Okay. And it's really, and I love talking about that, because some of the people that are there go, wait a second, it's because we need to teach. So one of the things that we do is just walking in, and we could say good and walk in and reward the dog there. Now, there are a lot of people that don't do that, okay, that will not do that. And I'm like, well, if you, let's even, I can have the best, one of my dog Duke was one of the best dogs in Hollywood at one time. He was a big dog, you know, of the commercials and stuff. And even with Duke, I'd walk in and reward him 80% of the time because that's where he's getting reward. That's where it all, if I'm constantly saying yes and releasing him here, why should he ever stay there? Mm-hmm. So the one thing we try to take away, I take away from my things is walk in and work your dog. I mean, you know, make that spot where he is reinforcing, and it gives your dog less of a chance to cheat, less of your dog of a chance to anticipate things and stuff like that. So that's one thing.
So it's kind of like instead of being a terminal, it's the starter. It's like you're starting the dog. Like, time to work. Yeah. Let's go.
Yeah, and the thing is, and what we'll say is, like, what a lot of times we'll do is we'll use good. Good means a good is a good intermediate. It's an intermediate mark. It's right in the middle. It's you're doing great. We're not done.
Right.
You know, we also say the word okay. Okay is done. We'll say, go pick this. If okay means, I'll just say, all right. All right means, all right, you're done with that. Now do something else. Because our dogs might have to do 30 things in 2 minutes without us, without the cut. Okay. All right, go pick it up. All right, now go with him. He goes with, all right, now go over here. So I'll say, all right, that's a marker. But it avoids a dog from watching me because he knows I'm not going to look at Joel because I know I'm doing something else. So we'll say, all right. We'll say good. And then Bryan and I do the same. And Bryan will talk about it. But I mean, we use the word okay. Once we say, okay, we're all done. If you don't hear okay, we're not done. You know, so even though I use these different, you know, markers and stuff. So.
Yeah. And when you say you're done, like, you're done, go do whatever you want.
We're done.
We're not working anymore.
Play with a toy, with whatever, you know, you just go jump up on the crew and play with the crew.
Yeah.
You know, so
go chase a squirrel.
And Bryan, he'll explain to you some of the stuff he
What principles do you feel are helpful?
Well, I think probably the basic, very basic, is the dogs love, once they learn how to learn, and they're seeing what emotion you give them when they do what you ask them to do, they're happy. So as you're teaching them more, they're becoming more happy. It's like, oh, wow, I get to do this for you, and this makes you happy. This is great. Some people lose sight of that, and it's very, very positive for a dog when they do something for you to really show them how good that was. And they're like, wow, this is really, really cool. You know, as it was like, I did something nice. If I was a kid and somebody gave me an M&M, I'd be like, all right, what else do you want me to do? You know,
that's awesome. Yeah. What's the average amount of time it takes? Like, someone commissions you for a gig, right? What's the average amount of time it would take for like a commercial or a feature film?
That's a good question, but that's a really good question. You know,
and there's a reason I'm asking this question, to give people perspective. So
a good example is one of my really, really good friends and Bryan's relative, Steve Behrens, who actually trained the dog in I Am Legend. And that was his dog. Steve, I believe that dog was green too. I mean, because they wanted a specific dog that had that weird, that kind of that frail look. So he had to get that dog, and he had 4 months or 5 months to train that dog. But I believe, so sometimes you might be on this for 4 months, even 6 months. Friends of mine that did like Underdog and did Cats and Dogs, whatever. They're prepping Boone's, all that group. They were prepping for, I think it's somewhere between 6 months, maybe even longer than that. 6 months of training. So, but a lot of times when you're on a lot of times you'll have a day or two to prep or whatever, a job. Sometimes you go in, it's just a real basic thing and there's no prep time at all. But we call the word prep time. And that's something we're going to teach in our course as well. Understand what prep time is and things like that.
And that's cool to have that you guys have 6 months, 4 months, right? Versus like pet dog trainers, we're crunched into this frame of like, you got 3 weeks, you know, you got 6 weeks maybe, right? And because people are paying money per time, right? And so it's I think it's so valuable, like even as dog, like I've extended the programs that I've ran for my clients over the years to get longer and longer and longer, so we can take our time with the dogs, so we can get those dogs to like it and have enough time to fail and have enough time to learn and redeem themselves and figure it out, because that we've seen has had the best result for our clients. You know,
well, there's also when you're for film, it depends on what type of dog you're using. I mean, if they ask for a Saint Bernard or a Border Collie, well,
Right.
Saint Bernard's gonna take a while.
and they're a different type of dog. And then it depends on the script. What does the script call for? Is it just a dog that lies around all the time and okay, no big deal, or is it somebody who's running and jumping and climbing and going all? So there's a lot to it when you're prepping a job, and if you put the time in your dog, a TV show I did back in the 80s called Here's Boomer. I had trained everything that I knew how to train. And I felt that there was nothing the director could ask me for that I hadn't already trained. And this kind of bit me in the butt one day when the director was setting up a shot where my dog had to pick up a little silver spoon and put it in a teacup. And I'm listening to the director as they're setting this up before they started to light the shot. And I went, uh-oh. And I looked at Steve Behrens, who we just talked about, who was my second trainer. I looked at him and I said, is that in the script? And he said, yeah. And see, I had a big problem about reading scripts. I hated to read scripts. And I just figured, hey, my dog can do anything. I don't have to worry about it. So during the time they lit the set and had the cameras set and everything, I had trained the dog. I had trained him to go ahead and pick up a metal spoon and put it in there, which he just hated to do. And and this is something that we're teaching in the course, is how to read a script and how to know what your dog has to do. And this is so important in film business, and this is something that I learned the hard way by, not reading the script.
You'll learn. The bigger the mistake, the less you make it, right? So,
yes.
And that's fascinating, because when we're dealing with pet dog trainers who are dealing with like the real world dogs, and that variability exists with us too, right? Are we dealing with somebody who bought themselves 2 beautiful European German Shepherds just because they like their coats, but really work 14 hours a day and live in an apartment? Or are we dealing with someone who can hike their dog often and can communicate with their dog often and got a dog who is more conducive, let's say, to their lifestyle? And if that's the case, then that definitely adjusts our workload. And I think what Brent was asking, and as we get more into like the seminars and things, is how do you prep newer pet dog trainers to get more comfortable asking their clients for the appropriate amount of time? Because I notice in the pet dog training world, it's becoming more and more like marketeer friendly, which I don't necessarily think is good for the dogs. Like, 2 weeks, any dog, any command, any whatever, like send us the dog 2 weeks and they're done no matter what, guaranteed for life. And there's things like that which don't seem to make sense.
Yeah.
But I guess it looks good on an ad. Right.
Well, it makes people perceive it as possible in their budgets, or their time frame or their emotion, whatever it might be. But
versus like all of the more experienced dog trainers in the pet world and everything else, they're like, no, ask your client for the time. If you need 3-4 weeks, ask for it now, because they're going to be that much more upset if you call them halfway through and want more time.
Yeah. And that's one thing with all dog training for you guys. Like, you guys are masters of the process of dog training, right? And anyone who, like, one of our favorite episodes and interviews was with Michael Ellis, who's really big in the pet dog training world. And he said, you know what, if you're a person who just wants results, dog training's not going to be for you. You have to be in love with the process of training. Yeah, you spend months and months and months, or weeks and weeks and weeks in pet dog training, you spend weeks and weeks for a 5-minute demonstration. You know what I mean? And that's what you have to show for it, right? And like with you guys spend months and months and months for, cumulatively maybe 10-15 minutes of on-screen time. You know what I mean? Maybe less than that. And it's all worth it.
It is. How cool is it to teach your dog to do things and and progress with that and teach them other things. And it's like you got this partner who's learning these things for you, and you get to teach these things. And I mean, it's rewarding, not just for the dog, but for the person. I mean, it's so cool to go, wow, you did that. Hey, let's see, what else can we do? Can we do, I'm going to teach this. Yeah, it's just so cool.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of dog trainers wish they could do that with their boyfriends, girlfriends, spouses. It just doesn't work that way.
Well, here's a question for Joel: is when you started these seminars with J-Jack and Larry Krohn, I guess my question has to be, what was it about these two guys that made you want to run seminars with them?
Good question.
I was speaking at the IACP conference in Colorado Springs about 4 years ago, and Jay I'd never met before. Larry, I had started seeing some stuff on YouTube. So I just, I saw him in the bar, and I came up to him and said, "Hey, my name is Joel Silverman." And he goes, "I know who you are. I remember you showing Animal Planet and stuff like that."
Nice.
And I said, "I just want to tell you, your video, a little like your videos." I said, "Nobody people don't really know." I said, "But I do a lot of, I do e-collar stuff. I don't talk a lot about it because the public and the press and everything like that is crazy. I don't wear it on my sleeve, but I said, everything you do is exactly the way I do it. And it's like, and I've been doing it for about 10 years and stuff." And I said, so he really, he was like, "Oh, great," and stuff. And then my friend Amy Sadler,
Amy's really cool.
They were just finishing lunch, and he was sitting with Jay, and she was sitting with Jay, and she introduced me to Jay. He and I got a chance to speak maybe 2 or 3 times, spent some about, good quality time talking together. And then I really felt like back then I was like, I know it sounds funny, but I was like, I'd like to do something with these guys, something down the road. Well, it wasn't until about, Larry and I put something together. He and I put something together in Tucson a year ago, December. And then after that, I told him, I was like, I'd like to bring Jay in. So, I decided to I wanted 3 different types of things, because I'm a movie animal trainer. Jay does his thing, Larry does his thing. When we've all become really good friends, and stuff, and we look forward to it. So we go out every quarter, and I kind of run everything, and stuff. And I told those guys, listen, I'll just run it all, and for my corporation website and stuff. So that's kind of how it started. And I really, since that time, it's like when people are done, they realize that even though we're different, we're very, very similar, because we're all about the dog. We're all about the love. We're all about the relationship. We're all about, training that way. And we are very similar in so many ways,
That's great. Sorry, go ahead.
Was working with these guys, or was starting your seminar circuits for your different programs? I've got your different programs here written out, which we'll kind of get into one by one. Was that more your introduction to the pet dog training world?
It was. I mean, what happened was after I did, I've had the opportunity. I did a video called the Hollywood Dog Training Program. Believe it or not, in 1990, it was an infomercial. If you look at eBay,
yeah, I actually remember watching.
Yeah, we sold.
I loved infomercials.
Yeah, so I mean, it was in the early 90s. It was like 1990, 91. We sold a ton of those things, and so that was my first, getting out there. Because what I would do, I would go out and do, appearances and stuff, and even back then, and people go, "Oh yeah, your video is really cool" and stuff. And then 10 years later, I did a Good Dog You on Animal Planet, one of the very first shows. And then I go out more and more, and people will go, "Gosh, I really like the way you break things down and you make training simple." So that was, I've always had that. And then I decided to write the books in the mid 2000s. I started writing my books and getting out more. And I kind of, once I started getting out there, and I did some personal appearances, I kind of had a chip on my shoulder, because some of the stuff I was saying, and people were like, "Gosh, it's like, I never knew all this stuff." And I was like, "Gosh," I'm like, "Man, I got to get out here, because I'm like, there's information I really want to give these people." So that's really what kind of got me into, really in the early 2010, 11, getting out really more and reaching out more into the pet world,
dogs.
the pet dog world, and that's really kind of got me into it. Yeah.
Well, here's a question for you then, a follow up, and I'd like to get Bryan's thoughts on this as well, because I know you do. Your seminar circuit with Joel, right? And that's the, you guys do the training for film and TV together?
We're going to be launching it, which we'll talk about. Yeah,
okay, sure. Yeah. But now that you've had that experience in the pet dog training world, is there any pet dog training, pet dog training technique that you think would benefit the film dog training world?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Oh my gosh. Like Bryan touched on the foundation, and there are the reason we're launching this course is because I've certified over 400 trainers in my dog trainer certification courses. Okay?
That's awesome.
And the people that I've certified are incredible dog trainers that live in cities other than Atlanta and Los Angeles, because we don't want to market to our in great competition with our friends in those areas. But these are cities that, and I've seen some incredible working dogs. So I've always said, it's like, man, these kind of people could be great movie animal trainers. And so, but that's why we launched it, because it's all about the foundation. And some of these people have got great heels, they've got great sit stays, they've got great down stays. And if you've got a great down stay, great sit stay, and a great heel, and a great recall, and a dog really is into food, Bryan will tell you, man, we could take that dog and just be like, that dog will just to the next level.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's interesting when you think about it. The dog training is dog training. Training is training. But once you get into dog training, like say Jay and Larry, they're training, but they're in a specialized kind of field, as are we.
Yeah.
In the film business, and the dog training starts to branch out a little bit, like, okay, this is this and this is it. So there's a big difference between, say, what Larry and Jay does compared to what Joel and I do. It's all dog training, but there is so much to learn about training.
Right.
If you just want to train your pet, what do you want to do? Do you want to stop them from jumping up on people, or do you want to teach them to mail a letter? These are all different training.
Right. Or get you a beer from the fridge,
Well, that's okay. I'm done.
Did you catch it? Sorry.
Oh,
well, no.
Okay.
No, I was
here's
just commenting. I wasn't trying to cut you off. I'm sorry.
Well, here's a follow-up question for the both of you then is, do you think, because I wanted to ask you both, being film dog trainers and in the world of Hollywood, and I've always heard how important it is to network, it's who definitely can help you, and making positive connections, and I can feel just by your guys' like warmth and openness, how
a lot of people like you.
Yeah, right. I can feel how easy it is to communicate with you, I guess I should say. With that in mind, then, when you're working with someone who's trying to figure out which of those branches of dog training to look into, would something like a big network, a big way for them to kind of assess and figure out what modality of dog training, would something like that be useful, you think, in the future?
So I think a network a network like that would be huge, because to figure out which direction they want to go into. Absolutely, there's no question in my mind, because everybody's different. Everybody's got different. People are different emotionally. There are some people that I've met before, to be honest with you, that are they're just a little bit better with compulsion. They're in dealing with compulsion. They're better with training dogs not jump up on people, and a little more control, and that's just who they are. And they do really, really good in that way. And they're not really super outgoing, and voices and stuff like that. Like we talked a little bit about your voice. But there are some people that their inflections are really high inflections. They can get emotional. They can do this. They can go, and they can do they can deal with the compulsion stuff, but they can also do train using positive reinforcement and train behaviors and moving animal type stuff. So I've seen a lot of people. As a matter of fact, some of the people that we're marketing to, that I've worked with before, are great e-collar trainers. Some of these great e-collar trainers, I've seen some really, really great, but they've also got some really, really good dogs I worked with at my seminars. So they're machines. They're as good as like 50% of the dogs in Hollywood that work on the set,
Right. Yeah. I saw some of those dogs at the Irvine one.
Yeah.
Are there characteristics like that of what makes a good pet dog trainer, or not a pet dog trainer, a good set dog trainer? Are there certain characteristics that you would say like that make them more with the aptitude to be a pet dog trainer?
You mean a difference between a pet dog trainer and a Hollywood dog trainer?
Yeah, because kind of to Joel's point, he's like, there are some people who are better with compulsion. Like that makes more sense to them, temperament-wise, or maybe character. There are some people who don't have the temperament to deal with a dog trying to lunge at your face.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, well,
you know what I mean?
It is taking dogs, for instance. You and it depends on the job and the dog that you're going to use. And some dogs, if you're going to do an action thing, a German Shepherd, Border Collie, something like that might be a much better choice. But then a director may want something that's completely different. Like a Saint Bernard. I worked on the last Beethoven movie I was a stunt coordinator.
nice.
I wasn't the dog trainer, but they had some issues with the dog wanting to. The director wanted to run up and down stairs quickly. Well, the St. Bernard's not going to do that.
You're
But
not gonna do that.
if you have a border collie, he'll be so fast you'll have to slow him down. And when you're talking
Right.
about which way would you go in dog training, it depends on where your interest lies. If you're really into teaching your dog and wanting to do film business, then that's a good thing. You need to come to our course. But if you want to do jumping over things and competing in like the border collies do and those other dogs, then that's a whole other thing. Or do you want to teach dogs to find people in avalanches or cadavers or things like that?
Right.
These are all different areas to go, and you're not going to do all of them. It's just there's a lot of different training, and when you find out these different avenues of training, it is fantastic because I look at some things like Jay and Larry for the things that they do, and I'm listening going, wow, that is so interesting. And I've been training dogs for since 1972. And I'll hear what these guys are talking about now, and I'll go, wow, that's really cool. I didn't know that. There's a lot of different ways, to go.
Yeah. And
Bryan actually a year ago, Bryan was our guest speaker. Actually, he was actually out for about 20 minutes in St. Louis with me and Larry and Jay. So all four of us were out there together. And so he got a chance to spend some time with those guys.
Oh, super cool. Are you coming out this time to St. I'm coming out to St. Louis.
You're asking me? No.
No. Yeah, no. Oh, man. Well, you and I have to catch up some other time for sure.
Yeah, but you got to come to the course.
Math. You've been training dogs for 50 years.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Yeah,
sure. Yeah,
we should cover that one too.
Absolutely,
that'd be great. You've been training dogs for 50 years. I just did the math. 1972.
And I'm still learning
right now.
That's the thing about dog training also and I said this in my book that you're not going to know everything. You're never going to know everything.
Right.
You want to just be as good as you can and listen and watch. I learned so much by watching Frank Inn and these different trainers, Carl Miller and people like that. I would just sit there as a new trainer and I just go, wow, I didn't know you could do that. Wow, I'm going to try that. And as a matter of fact, I was working on my TV series back in the 80s, and a guy named Clint Rao, who was one of the best dog trainers I feel around, he did Down and Out in Beverly Hills and all that. And his dog had to die. And this was part of the episode. And I'm sitting there watching this, and Clint had the dog walk straight away from camera and fall down on his side, away from camera. And there was no trainer in front of the dog. He was working him from behind. And I saw that, and I went back to the studios, and I trained my dog that worked in the animal show to do everything he knew from behind. I could stand behind him. And that's what we now call a work away, where the dog works completely away from you. And he did everything. Crawl and lie down and sit up and do all that stuff. And I realized that is a big value when you're doing film work. If you want to work the dog to an actor and shoot from behind the dog onto the actor and not see a trainer behind the dog.
But I would take that skill even further and say, you know how many people who own pets would love to train their dog, have their dogs listen from 20 yards away? You know what I mean? Like that sounds like an amazing skill right there. We're running a little bit out of time. I want to jump into these seminar circuits and what the best way for people to find you guys. You guys have a lot of content. You guys have been doing this for years. So you guys have books, video series, television shows, all of that stuff. Can we just go down the list, whatever order you guys would like to plug it? Please do.
So one of the reasons we created this course was because as I said, we've met a lot of awesome dogs and trainers across the nation in other places other than LA and Atlanta. And so Bryan and I have always kind of talked about this anyways and stuff. And so, but to create something that is a course that people can learn about, there's just so many aspects about being on the set, all the people on the set, who's the director, the AD, the craft service, lighting director, the grips, and who these people are, because having a good relationship with these people is huge. And you asked a little question about us, our personalities and stuff like that. And so you come on the set with our personality, you meet the right person, they already see that you're into the dog, understanding who these people are, understanding the cameras, all the different cameras. There's cameras on tripods, on wheels. There's cameras. There's dollies. There's this. There's that. If your dog is weird towards wheels, you got to desensitize your dog's wheels because there's a lot of wheels there.
Yep.
Right.
Understanding all those different things, and steady cams. Creating something that looks like a steady cam because you've never been on a steady cam before, and he sees that thing and the guy's walking towards the dog.
That's scary as hell. Yeah.
Exactly. So desensitization. So we, there's just a lot of stuff that we go through. We're going to be going through, and then we're also going to be going through, setting up shots like Bryan talked about. How to read a script, how to break down a scene. Breaking down a scene and training the scene. But then we're going to, the last couple of days, we're actually going to shoot with cameras. We're going to edit and let people see.
That's awesome.
They'll be working dogs around the camera, and they're going to see some of the looks, and they're going to see, dog didn't look good here. They look good here, and we'll redo it on Friday and give them a chance to redo it on Friday from what they did on Thursday and stuff. So it's going to be kind of fun. So
that's cool. How long is that series?
It's 5 days. It's going to be 8 to 5. It's going to be 5 days. We're doing 4 cities. Our first one's going to be in May. Right now we've got it set for May 11th to 16th. I might have to push it for 1 week or 1 week earlier. But anyway, yeah.
And where in the States is that going to be?
Our first one's Salt Lake City.
Salt Lake City, Utah.
So we'll be Salt Lake City. We'll be in Salt Lake City, St. Louis, Charlotte, and I believe Orlando. So those are, and if anybody has a group of people in a certain city that I didn't mention, let us know because we're still putting these things together. We're getting a lot of emails from people.
That'd be awesome.
Okay.
And how can they sign up for something like that? Where do they go?
You can go to my website, which is joelsilverman.net, and you'll click on the drop-down menu under courses. You'll see about the course. So you can read all about the course. There's actually an agenda sheet that you can actually print out. It gives you the whole agenda of what we're doing every single day, and stuff that we kind of wavered on doing because we didn't want to give away too much, but we felt like, who the other people are going to go out and do this
who else is going to do it?
Right.
Who's going to do it with as well and with as much experience as you two bring to the table?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
And people bring their dogs, 2-3 dogs, the more the merrier. And Bryan, am I missing anything, Bryan?
I was just going to, it's just something I picked up on earlier. We were talking about, Joel and mine, overwhelming great personality. You have to you have to try to create happiness and fun on a set, and it's very important, like Joel was saying, to to make friends with the director, the assistant director, the DP, and even all the way down to the craft service. And the reason for that is it's going to be much better for you because the dog will feel tension on the set. And you have to make sure that everything is happy as you can get it, and that the dog does not feel the tension. And there are, especially some people in the past on film sets, directors and things, who yell and scream, and that creates a lot of tension. And then when you want to work your dog is already worried. And now you're going to try to tell them to do something, and they're worried. And one of the reasons that Joel and I love to use a single word, or I say okay, which is the end of okay, done, big deal. But I never let the dog stop, and I will use, wow, what a good boy. That is so good. I love the way you're staying. I love the way you're doing it. That is never a release. And the reason I and Joel do that is if you're working on a film set and your dog has to stay while the actors are doing their dialogue, and he just has to stay there. I find breaks in the dialogue, and I will say, good boy. Now it's not a release, but it allows the dog to know, oh, okay, I'm doing fine. I don't have to worry. Am I not doing something that they want me to? The dog is nice and relaxed. And so you can keep doing that. It's like, wow, what a good boy. Okay, that's good. And we use that.
No, I love that. One of our R+ trainers that we had on, we quoted her as saying, in motivation work, you're trying your best to control the environment versus in like behavior work, you're trying to control the dog. Right. And I think this is a best balance of like, you're controlling the environment and making sure the dog is prepped for that environment. So you get the best performance possible. And you guys are doing performances for film, and people just want performances for life. But I think the principles are valuable no matter where you're at.
And it's interesting because you're kind of like prepping the dog. You're kind of adjusting the dog's perception of the environment.
Yeah, because that's some scary shit on set. I've seen. Dogs. I mean, I actually have a film degree, and so I wanted to be a gaffer when I was younger, right? And I mean, even something as simple as putting a phone in front of a dog scares the shit out of them sometimes, So imagine putting a giant ARRI camera in front of the dog. It's like gonna freak them the heck out.
Well, a boom mic is something they have to get used to.
Yeah,
because even though they mic a lot of people, they still use boom mics. And when I would be training, I just grab a broom and just hold it over here and kind of wave it, not over the dog, but just kind of wave it and reward the dog, and then bring it in closer and closer and closer until you can get over there and get the dog used to it. The same thing with a dolly. When they set up a track and a dolly, and your dog does not know that, the only thing he's going to be looking at is that lens. That camera is coming right at me.
Oh my, dude, that just opened up my mind to something, because in essence, a camera is tracking, which for dogs is predatory, right? Like a camera is you're tracking you. So behaviorally, dogs are going to be like, what the fuck is
like, what is this thing that's smoothly scoping in my direction?
And especially on a dolly where I'm fucking following everything you're doing. That's like controlling behavior amongst dogs. So,
but that's why we teach people raised up when you get it down, when you start working in the set, you got a puppy, raise your puppy on the set. People, lights and everything. And you guys have been on the set before, and a lot of the people who are listening, you've never been on the set before. But we'll go into what's called a sound stage, and a sound stage is a massive area. But many times there's a small little area that's lit where they're filming, where the set is. But the other 80% of the sound stage is all black. There's nothing out there. Well, if a dog is raised on that, he doesn't care. But if a dog is never raised out there, they're like, what is that?
Yeah, where are we? What's going on?
So really, really super important. So that's what
the amount of resilience, you have to teach into a dog to be a set dog is I think that in and of itself would.
Desensitization is like the key word,
that would be that'd be super valuable for pet dog trainers, I think.
Yeah.
Learning how to do that and socialize a very resilient, mentally strong
You have
dog.
to do that.
That's awesome.
And Joel, we do the same thing. Once my dog is trained to a certain point, I take him right to a grocery store at the exit where people are walking in and out. And I'll have them go through all the behaviors. I'll let somebody come up and pet them. I'll let somebody come up and reward them. I'll even have somebody tell the dog to sit and lie down and reward them. And that is so good.
That's awesome.
Because you have no idea what is good. As a matter of fact, I had a job one time, and it wasn't even my dog. I didn't really know the dog, but I was sent on a job. And when the description was given to me on the person who owned the dog, it said all he has to do is pick up a VHS cassette tape and sit with it. Okay, no problem. I get there, and it's downtown LA, and it's next to the railroad tracks, and the train pulls up to the railroad tracks, and the guy takes it from him. Well, that was maybe you should have told me that in the beginning. You know, I mean, a lot of dogs aren't going to sit there with the train pulling up next to them. He did, and we got
For
it.
sure.
Right.
But it would have been something nice too. So your dogs, you know, you can't just train your dog in the backyard and expect him to work on a film set. Once your dog is trained, you got to take them everywhere.
100%. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I love the amount of trust that a dog has to have in the handler in order to do something like that, because it makes zero natural sense for a dog to want to stay anywhere near a moving train.
Yeah.
But if you say it's okay, right? But if you say it's okay, they're trusting you, and they're it's almost like a trust fall. It's a really cool thing, and then you reward them and let them know.
I got you.
It's this right. It's this fun sort of like, if you listen to me, you'll be okay.
And something Bryan said real quick was that, you know, when we go to, because we both do the same thing to desensitize dog, we go to the grocery stores. Open, and when that dog is sitting or lying down next to open and closing doors, you know, stuff, and you're in a sit stay, lie down stay from 20 feet away, you can apply that to anything. Perfect.
Right.
It's perfect for the dog training world. Perfect.
Right.
You know,
100%.
highly recommend it.
So let's talk a little bit about your books. People who are interested in getting to know more about you. I know you have an autobiography, Bryan. Joel, you have a bunch of books. You have two colored. What color is your dog books, right?
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell the audience a little bit more about that?
Okay, yeah. So basically, my first book was called What Color Is Your Dog? Second book is more What Color Is Your Dog? I really recommend the second one. You don't need to get the first one.
Okay.
The second one is basically,
and that's coming from the author, guys. He's like,
the
first one was a trial for the second.
I mean, it's the first one, and it's a great looking book. The first one is there's no pictures, and I mean, it's a beautiful book and everything.
Yeah.
The second one is just, it's not as pretty, but it's like it's better information and stuff like that.
I love that.
More What Color Is Your Dog? Take Two Training Solutions for Rescue Dogs. The same publishing company. They did that one. It was a follow up. It was a good book. And then we did another book called Bond with Your Heart, Train with Your Brain. It's a self-help book for parents, teachers, managers, and supervisors.
Wow.
It's all about dog training. It talks about the best dog trainers I met in my life are just nice people. The best parents, teachers, and managers and supervisors I've ever met are nice people. And it all talks about the bond and relationship. It's pretty cool. And then my last book, my newest book is called Rituals. That's the one I did recently. And it really talks about really understanding your dog and understanding the game, and every life, you know, training should be a game. It should be always a game, and looking, you know, so.
Now, question for you, because I know my generation doesn't read as many books these days. Are any of these on audiobook or audible?
The Rituals is on audio. Rituals, More What Color Is Your Dog, and Rituals, More What Color Is Your Dog, and Bond with Your Heart
I'm buying those books today. If they're on audiobook.
They're on audio.
Love it. And then how about you,
I've
Bryan?
only written 2 books, and this one, Casey, up here, was a dog. This is the actual picture of a dog I had while I was doing stunt work, but I trained a dog to do film work, and he was probably the best trained. I was in Toronto. He got a lot of work, and I after he passed away. It bothered me so bad that I wrote a story about him. And so it's a real dog, but a fictional story. And then this book, which I just happen to have right here, that's my autobiography.
What's it called? Hard work. What? Hard work, dumb luck.
Dumb luck. It's
hold it up.
Hard work and dumb luck. How a road through gangs, drugs, and a jungle ended up in Hollywood.
I love that, man.
That's really cool.
It's a great book.
It's all true too.
Yeah. Is that one on audiobook?
No, I haven't done.
Is that on audiobook? Okay, we got to get it. We got to get it on audiobook.
Well, yeah,
it's crazy. That's how many books I've consumed auditorially.
Well, if I could get this certain actor to do it, I'd love it. But
who would you have?
I would have and for some reason his name escapes me, and I think he's one of the greatest actors in the world. He was on that prison movie with Shawshank Redemption.
I'm looking it up. We got to find out who this is.
Who was he? In the movie?
He was the buddy of the main actor in the movie. And I can't, for some reason, that name escapes me. But Morgan Freeman.
Tim Robbins.
I love his
Morgan
voice.
Freeman? Yes.
He has the greatest scene
Morgan Freeman
in movie business. I think in that movie.
He's an amazing actor.
In that movie?
He's right before he gets paroled. and he tells that, he says, well, are you okay now? Or do you think, and he just goes off on these guys. And I think, to me, I forget the words of the scene, but to me, it was one of the greatest scenes that I've ever seen. I think it's just, and Morgan Freeman, you can watch anything Morgan Freeman is in, and it's good.
And it's awesome. He played God in that movie with Jim Carrey.
Bruce Almighty.
Almighty, yeah.
And Evan Almighty too. I think he was back for that one.
Yeah.
What's your guys' favorite film?
Oh man,
that they've worked on, or just in general?
In general.
My favorite film. My favorite film.
What's your favorite film, Joe?
Mine's Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
Pulp Fiction, okay.
Yeah, that's a classic.
Pulp Fiction.
Shawshank Redemption.
There you go. Specifically because of Morgan Freeman.
Oh, and there's a really good movie called Murder at 1600 that I did a lot of acting on. So that was one of my favorite movies. I'm just kidding.
Oh, wow. Maybe I didn't.
No, I mean, I worked on it, but it's
what?
not my favorite movie.
Murder.
Brian played. Who's the actress you played her husband for 30 seconds, Brian, in the movie till you got killed?
That was
who was
a movie called
Holly
Crash.
He played Holly Hunter's husband.
Yeah, I did. Nice. Well, I did.
It was your 30 seconds
it was
of
longer
fame.
than that, but no, in the film, it was about 30 seconds. Yeah, but I get to. It was one of a really nice stunt that I got to do, because we do a head-on collision, and it shoots me through the windshield of my car, and then through the windshield of the other car, and. Yeah, so that was really a great stunt. And
so what's that movie called?
What? Sorry. Oh, that one's called Crash.
That movie, what was that called?
Yeah.
Oh, it's literally called Crash. Awesome, great guys. All right, well, I think we're running close to our 2-hour mark. Anything you guys want to talk about before we close up?
No, I just want to say, hey, thanks for having us. Really, really appreciate it. And you go to our my website, joelsilverman.net. Just click on drop down menu under animals for trained for film and TV course.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think I might, once you solidify those dates, I'm super interested in coming.
I would love to go, genuinely.
To just see it. Like I'd bring my own dog. My dog's very well trained, but he already knows how to learn. So maybe that's the foundation. I can get him an agent.
But thanks for having us. Really,
thank you,
man.
guys.
You guys are
really cool.
Thank you so much. So a question.
Thank you so much.
That means a lot coming from people as nice as you guys, genuinely.
Well, nice experience, and you guys have been around too, and it's like, we look up to people like you guys.
Just before we let you go, we have a question that we ask all of our guests, and we phrase it this way. So if dog training is an art, we ask each individual guest, what is it on an individual level? What do you do with your color palette, with the way you move your brush strokes? What's something unique or different in your dog training experience? Right, a skill you have that really adds to your training.
I would say emotion and how you treat your dog. A lot of it is emotion, and I think that's probably the biggest part of it.
I love that answer.
That's a great question. I love that question about the brush. My palette would be a ton of variety of colors, and various different brush strokes. Not broad brush strokes, not little brush strokes, but a various. So it's various brush strokes,
right?
Different sizes, different large ones.
So being diverse, in your knowledge,
exactly.
Being open.
Yeah.
I love that.
Cool. Thank you guys so much.
Appreciate you guys so much.
Looking forward to seeing you in St. Louis, by the way. We'll be out there, and I'm looking forward to it.
2 weeks.
Very coming up very, very soon. All right, everybody. This was Joel Silverman and Bryan Renfro, two of Hollywood's best film set dog trainers, or Hollywood dog trainers. If you guys want to go ahead and check them out, you guys can check them out on Instagram. Joel Silverman is at Joel Silverman Dog Trainer. And then Bryan is at brenfro68. You guys can also check them out at their website and check out their new up-and-coming Hollywood dog training course that they have coming out. You can go to joelsilverman.net and check out the courses schedule on the drop-down menus. We really appreciate you guys for coming on. This is Season 2, Episode 11. My name is Brent LaBrada. That guy's Mariano Alvarez. Again, thank you to Joel Silverman and Bryan Renfro for being on. And we will see you guys in episode 12 of season 2. Peace.
Peace. Thank you for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers, for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
We really hope that you enjoyed this episode and can't wait to be back with you guys. Be sure to follow us at Dog Trainers Podcast on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. And don't forget to punch the hell out of that subscribe button and leave us a review.
Remember, guys, this is your podcast. You're the best listeners in the world, and we'll see you next time.